I would like to ask our Chancellor now to make a recommendation to us on the tuition issue that we have been discussing for some months.
Good afternoon. You charged me with making a recommendation to you about in-state undergraduate tuition. And I would like to recommend that we raise in-state undergraduate tuition by 5%, effective with the spring semester, beginning January 2008. This increase, members of the board, would amount to $3.68 a credit hour. It would be mandatory, and we also recommend that a minimum of 30% of the revenue generated by this increase should be allocated to need-based financial aid to help any students who might occasion a hardship from this increase, to cover that additional funding, to cover that additional gap that would be created by this increase. That's my recommendation.
Questions of the Chancellor?
The recommendation.
Second.
Questions or comments?
I have a comment.
Yes, sir. Governor Dasper.
I'm a little concerned about tuition increases that drag along with them allocations of the tuition. And if we're not careful, every year we'll have a tuition increase, and this year it'll be for financial aid, and next year it'll be for something else, and the year after that, before you know, we have this big Christmas tree of designated purposes for tuition. Now, I recognize it's fungible, so it comes in, you figure out what the number is, and then you keep track of it in a notational account. But it seems to me that it puts this Board of Governors in a position of what I'll call micromanaging, for lack of a better expression. And I'd feel a lot better at this time if we just approved the tuition increase and we provided the presidents with our views with regard to whatever matters concern us, and hopefully they'll react. And if over a period of time they don't react to those views, we can then deal with that issue directly, as opposed to linking it to annual increases or anything else that we do here. So for that reason, I would not be in favor of this motion as it was articulated.
Are you offering an amended motion or asking?
Well, I mean, I would amend the motion and delete the directions with regard to how it has to be applied. And then I would take in the minutes the sense of this committee, if this is the sense of the committee, that the sense of the board, that we would be hopeful they'd be mindful of our position with regard to aid to those who need financial aid, where we rank relatively low in the United States, and address those problems and move on.
May I ask a question of President Manchin or one of the presidents? By doing it at this time, can that be included in bundling of any other financial aid? I mean, I don't really, I'll be very frank, understand how that's done in the time frame.
Well, I just would like to associate myself with the governor's comments. I mean, we're going to provide need-based financial aid for those that need it, and they will not have to cover this increase. Maybe it'll be 40%, maybe it'll be 20%. This is such an odd year to have that tagged and then have to keep it tagged going forward, that I think the board's feelings about need-based aid are no different than all the presidents. We believe we don't have enough, and we try wherever we can to put some in there. Most of the need-based aid for this year has already been taken care of in our own financial aid distributions. So you can do it either way you want, but flexibility is really important for us as we come into a mid-year cycle here where we're trying to meet budget cuts at the same time moving forward.
We need to be respectful of the presidents and of the trustees in dealing with this. Thank you, President Manchin.
Madam
President
Chair?
Hitt.
I'm sorry.
Madam Chairman, I would just agree with President Manchin, but I certainly am with the Chancellor in spirit. I think most of the studies that have been done, at least those I'm aware of, will show that 25 to 30%, if you allocate 25 or 30%, you tend to make the tuition increase neutral with regard to its impacts on students with real financial need. So if we had a guideline of 25 to 30%, but not a rigid requirement, I think it would meet everyone's needs.
Madam Chair, can I just,
Governor Edwards and the Governor Parker.
this is a quick question. Mark, can you repeat, I guess, what you proposed so I missed it and I want to kind of match it up with what John is suggesting.
As it relates to the need-based financial aid?
Yeah,
or the whole?
There's the whole.
Yes, we also recommend that a minimum of 30% of the revenues generated from this tuition increase should be allocated to need-based financial aid.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you
Yes.
for
Governor Edwards.
I agree with both sides here.
Are you a politician?
With Governor Dashburg, I think the point is that we want to make it clear as we look to tuition increases not only now but in the future, that need-based aid will be a major portion of that. Why don't we take the percentage out and simply say that there be an emphasis on need-based aid.
I second that motion.
That says, tells the message, but it doesn't tie us to a number.
Mikey, who's seconding and do they accept?
I accept it.
Do you? All right, we have a corrected motion. Does everybody understand it? Governor?
This is a separate question.
Okay.
I've read in some of the clips there was some question or concern about a mandatory one versus the being implemented at the board level. I don't know if we still have any of the chairs here, any of the presidents want to speak to that point of us mandating it down to you versus you guys adopting it at the local level.
Yes, ma'am. No, it was more confusion than anything because a lot of the discussions in some of the documents reflected an up to or no more than 5%. We weren't just sure when the question came up about the proposed spring tuition increase, what the direction of the board would be in that regard. So that's all that was, at least as related to us.
Chancellor, do you have a comment? Sir?
The value of us sticking together on this issue is that it can't be denied that our institutions are under stress and that we are struggling to maintain our graduation rates. And I would welcome a conversation with each of the presidents in a different venue about why they might not need the revenue, but I think they all do. And so from the viewpoint of a system and developing a system, it would be very useful for us to stick together on this issue.
Thank you. And for the record, does everyone understand Governor Edwards and Governor Chase's motion?
Can I one more comment or question?
Yes.
I'm not going to try to tie it to with an amendment or anything, but I just kind of want to, when we discussed this in Orlando, I had really hoped that we would tie this dialogue and discussion to some system-wide level efficiencies and things, and I want to continue to put that on the table, that I think it's important that we tackle that side of the equation as well as the revenue side of the equation, and just would hope that we get that back on the agenda.
Governor Duncan, I think what you said is very important, and I agree with it. But the conversation needs to continue, and I expect it to continue and us have success. However, out of respect to the trustees and their chairman, I think we have the conversation and direct them to work with us, but I would maybe have some hesitancy in tying their hands.
I call the question.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. Thank you. I do know what call the question is. Chancellor Rosenberg? Item 5 for everyone who's following. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe Governor Dashburg will initiate the conversation.
Sir. And thank you, Governor Dashburg, for your many hours of time and commitment to this.
You're more than welcome, and I know how many hours of time and commitment every member of the board and the staff and the president's put into advancing our systems. So I'm one small cog in this process. The transmittal letter from the Chancellor was 1 page long, and I think it adequately summarized the situation. We embarked on this some time ago. We had a presentation in June by the Pappas Group. We had considerable discussion at that time, and a lot has transpired since then under the kind of general view that politics is the art of the possible. I think what the Chancellor has done is made a proposal here that is reasonable, that is possible. Not everyone is going to agree with every element of this proposal, but I hope that we can derive a consensus around this board around the proposal that the Chancellor has made. That does not mean it can't be modified, and I hope that if there's any strong views here, we can make it better. The Board of Governors can make this proposal better. But I believe that the amount of time and energy that has been put into bringing forward a real structured, strategic set of initiatives for the next decade or so is a useful process, and I think ultimately we need a blueprint so that when we speak to the legislature, we speak from a blueprint that every year we want dependable funding at adequate levels. We owe the legislature a strategy against which they are actually making that funding available, those appropriations. So I would hope we could get on about this. The salient features are that the 10 universities will be it for the foreseeable future, and that henceforth, when we deal with the baccalaureate shortfalls in the state, that the new universities/colleges will be baccalaureate only until this board determines that we ought to amend the strategy. And I would think that would be sometime in the future, in the distant future. Another salient feature is, and if you look at the appendices, you will see this, that our retention rates and our graduation rates at the existing universities for undergraduate diplomas need to improve, and need to improve rather significantly. And I would hope that this board would agree with that, and that we would make certain, and basically on the incentive funding, we've already made it clear that we anticipate that graduation rates and retention will be part of the funding formula, and I think that's critical. But the existing universities can do a better job, but prospectively, where there are unmet needs, we will build baccalaureate institutions, not what we can label, and anyone can choose their terms here because we all have our favorites, but whether you call them comprehensive or extensive or research, that will stop at the 10. We are fortunate that with a lot of foresight, including Governor Edwards, we have these universities situated around the state, in the north and the west and the south and the east and wherever, and so they seem to be in pretty good geographic positions in the state. And then there is, of course, the whole issue of funding, and basically the proposal that we'd like to be able to take to the legislature is that our method of funding will reward the universities for producing the graduates in those areas that are important to the state based on our analytics and based on the strategic plan that the Board of Governors has previously adopted. And so I think if we deal with those key issues, everything else is more or less a means to an end. There is an item in here, and if you look at, again, the stack of appendices, there is an item in here that lays out an approval process for PhDs. And the goal there is under that higher level of abstract notion that we want to focus the universities, and that has a certain abstraction to it, but we want to focus the universities, and to some extent that means whoever got there first has some advantages. On the other hand, by getting there first, as the state grows in population and as the geography of the state or the demographics of the state shifts, there will be some duplication of some areas of study, and that's just the way states or the way demographics work. The appendix has included in it a comparison to California. I did that, obviously intentionally, since it's the only system we compared ourselves to, because we are soon to be the third most populous state. California has a system that, by most measures of quality, has been successful. You may choose some other state to compare ourselves to, but I think California is a pretty good example. Basically, out of 9 universities, soon one could argue to be 11 based on their decisions, but basically out of 9 universities, they have 7 that are ranked very high. And so I think it's not a bad comparison. You'll notice when you study, and I hope everyone keeps that document and thinks about it and studies it, because you will notice, for example, that whether you can say this is by a positive correlation or the fallacy and logic of post hoc propter hoc, the fact of the matter is that most of those universities have more or less restricted their undergraduate enrollment. So if you look at those universities, you don't see any universities in California with 75,000 or 55,000 undergraduate students. What happens is, as those universities have pressure on them for access for baccalaureates, new colleges are built that are baccalaureate driven. I'm not suggesting today that we have to have that plan, but I think as we go forward, we need to be alert to the fact that the pressure on our universities for access can easily be met by introducing baccalaureate institutions, which ultimately, as we go from the third most populous to perhaps the second most populous, we will need in any event. So that is kind of the overview. Let's improve quality by making sure our universities are focused. Let's provide criteria for the PhD, which helps bring that focus. Let's make sure that we're producing the type of undergraduate results we're looking for in both retention and rates by both financial incentives and jawboning. And then let's make sure that in the future we're introducing baccalaureate institutions as opposed to these broader-based, however we choose to define them, universities. And with that background, you've received a document that lays all of that out more or less. There's one item in there where we've suggested that this board approve masters as well as PhDs. That's in there because historically we find that obviously you have a master's program and it grows into a PhD, and it seems that if this board reviewed the master's earlier and if it was represented it was going to grow into a PhD, it'd take some of the Sturm and Drang out of the next proposal when the PhD comes, because we'll already look at it. If you come in and propose a master's degree and you say, and we're not going beyond the master's degree, and you come back and something's changed, obviously the board will first say, well, you said you were never going to ask for a PhD, request a PhD. But it doesn't mean that there won't be one approved, but at least it gets the board in the process a tad bit earlier. I think in the long term it's in the university's best interest that we get involved a little bit earlier. We have to just make sure that we as a board will assure you that just as we altered the process where the staff was the screen for what got to the board, now all PhD proposals come to this board. The staff does the staff work, but we make the decision. The same would have to be true on master's degrees. We don't want the staff to stop a proposal, but we want the proposal to be consistent with the criteria. And so that's the end of my spiel, and I'll be available for questions later. Where is the Chancellor? The Chancellor is now going to make a short slide presentation which will be consistent with the information that you received. And again, I urge you to keep the appendices available for reference. I think they're very insightful.
Madam Chair, I'm simply moved to recommend that we go forward. Thank you, Governor Dasberg. There are 3 initiatives that we are bringing to you. First is to improve quality, as Governor Dasberg has stated. Second is to increase baccalaureate degree production. And the third is to provide appropriate and predictable funding. And what I would like to do is spend a moment on each. On improving quality, we've talked about quality since at least for 2 years, and we have an approach to quality, freezing the current number of state universities that offer graduate programs. We would like to become much more engaged in approving strategic planning compacts with each of our universities. Those compacts would emphasize performance and improvement. We've actually started that conversation. Right now, we have no ability to understand the relationship between our broader system strategic plan and what each of our institutions are doing on an annual basis. So the strategic planning compacts emphasizing performance and improvement could help us in that. We believe it's important to focus on distinctive missions and strengths. Focus our institutions. That's something that we continue to hear throughout the public affairs community. It's a question that some presidents raise about the directions of other universities, and other universities raise about where some presidents are going. The end result is there's a belief, I believe it's a mistaken belief, but there's a belief that everybody wants to be like somebody else. And the end result is that we know that's not the case, but we do have an obligation to ensure that our institutions focus. We do believe it's important to limit duplication, as Governor Dasberg has alluded, and to do that we want to strengthen program review. In the process, we think it's important to eliminate unproductive programs, what I would call the use it or lose it doctrine, particularly in the doctoral area. If we have doctoral degrees that are unproductive or do not have demand, they are very expensive degrees to maintain. Our board should have something to say about that. So in terms of improving quality, we're proposing a number of different directions that we would like to move. On baccalaureate degree production, we started the conversation really about a year ago, but much more seriously yesterday. We would like to fund performance in degree production. We think performance is where we should be. We should talk performance at every moment. And I know our presidents are committed to that, but all of higher education needs to be much more committed to performance in terms of degree production. We should plan, as Mr. Dasberg has pointed out, at least to set the criteria for what new baccalaureate institutions would look like. Be they regional campuses that transform into standalone baccalaureate degree granting institutions, be they new baccalaureate institutions in areas where there's high demand, or be they community colleges that might indeed want to become full-service baccalaureate institutions. But in that, we need to work a lot more closely with other sectors in higher education. There needs to be more, not less, collaboration with the community colleges. There needs to be more, not less, communication with and collaboration with the independent colleges and universities of Florida. And what does that need to be centered around, that collaboration? We really don't have a strategic plan for higher education in terms of baccalaureate degree production. We do not have that. And that's why we periodically get into debates with community colleges in particular, who are our major partners, about who should be doing what. So we've got to find a way to work much more closely together, because the end result is, for us to stay competitive by the year 2027, we will have to produce an additional 1 million baccalaureate degrees for the business community to have the skill sets in the state of Florida that it will need to be commensurate with the size of population and with its leading role in the global economy. We also need to focus upon readiness and success of minority populations. Governor McDevitt's committee had a conversation about that yesterday, but we have to find a way to close the achievement gap. It's going to get larger rather than smaller unless we are working directly on this challenge. If we work on it, we're successful, we will increase baccalaureate degree production, particularly among individuals who otherwise might not have had access to a baccalaureate degree. And then finally, we need to find a way to increase collaborative distance education. We realize that's very important. We are not doing enough as a system to support that. Our presidents have done very well to this point, but there's probably some things that we could be doing as a system to facilitate access to baccalaureate production. Thirdly, Mr. Dasberg talked about funding. Appropriate and predictable funding. First, and I appreciated that earlier conversation about need-based financial aid. If we are to be successful in helping this state to be competitive in 2 decades, we will have to find a way to radically expand need-based financial aid to eligible students to improve access and affordability. And I'm very proud of the fact that our student government leadership has focused on that. And that was one of the points of the conversation with Governor Christ. And I hope that you continue to do that, Governor Mosley, because as you well know, there is not enough need-based financial aid for our students. Second of all, we propose to increase undergraduate in-state tuition to the national average. And here, we would use the revenues to improve the quality of our undergraduate education. Who knows? We might even be able to get out of the basement in student-faculty ratios. We might be able to hire new advisors so our students can graduate in a more timely manner. We might be able to have more mental health counselors so we can address some of the challenges that our undergraduates and graduate students have as they traverse the world of knowledge in a high-pressure environment that they find themselves in our universities. So we are recommending an increase in undergraduate in-state tuition to the national average. What is the national average today for public universities for undergraduates? It is $5,800. We are currently at $3,300 tuition and fees. Paradoxically, our low-cost tuition makes education almost unaffordable. Why? Because we are not providing enough need-based financial aid to the students who can least afford that low-cost education. So paradoxically, we can raise tuition and make our college education more accessible to students. And we will be happy to have that conversation in the forthcoming months. We need to revise the funding formula to focus on outcomes. This will also hopefully fund our enrollment growth. This is the part that relates to the state support. We believe that the legislature has done about as much for us as they can do. And that's why earlier I commended Representative Pickens and Senator Lynn for the entrepreneurial and creative way they've attempted to cobble together our budget for the remainder of this year. But we know going forward that the prospects for increased enhanced state support are not great. Look at the national trends. We'd like to revise the funding formula, develop a compact and agreement with the governor and the legislature, and get on with the business of graduating our students. Finally, members of the board, we would like to fund targeted investments in graduate programs, research, and commercialization that's consistent with the state's economic development needs. Frankly, we've made a good start through collaboration with the legislature, our centers of excellence. We got to do better on commercialization, getting our products into the marketplace, but I'm confident, given that we've had significant success, particularly at the University of Florida, University of Central Florida, and Florida State, that we can follow on that success for the well-being of the state of Florida. So, in sum, we would like to recommend that you adopt 3 initiatives as the core of your master plan. Improve quality, increase baccalaureate degree production, and provide appropriate and predictable funding. And then we would bring back to you, hopefully in December, a more detailed approach that you could discuss so that we could get on with the business of addressing the challenges that our state has to produce additional baccalaureate and high-quality university degrees. Thank you.
As a clarification before we have questions, and I know you have questions and comments.
Let me offer a clarification.
Yes, sir.
My way of thinking, I offer up to my fellow board members, is that if we focus our discussion today or shortly after today, it seems to me we could adopt the following motion. One, to agree that we're freezing the 10 universities, and prospectively the universities that are added / colleges will be baccalaureate only. 2, in the appendix is the criteria for approving PhDs. We ought to be able to approve that today. 3, we ought to approve, whatever discussion it necessitates, the approval process for approving master's degrees at the Board of Governors. And we can either decide to do it or not to do it. And fourth, we ought to, and this won't take a motion, but fourth, we ought to instruct the staff to go forward with compacts with each university and come back to the Board of Governors with regard to an agreement with each university on where they are today and where they will be over the next 5 years with regard to their improvement in baccalaureate production. And I think if we could come out of here today with those, we will have made a real concrete advancement on strategy here. That's the clarification that I offer up.
Comments, discussion?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
I have a comment on the goal to improve quality with the limit to duplication in new graduate program approval. And I know that that's been a major topic of discussion on this board, is the limiting of new graduate program approval. But I would urge this board, since we're using the California model, to go back and investigate which programs are in fact duplicated in the California system at all of those universities. Because in some cases, the duplicate programs by themselves lead to an improvement in quality in that institution. We really need to look at that.
Yes, sir.
One, we're not using the California system as a model. I'm offering that up as a comparison because it seems to me to be a sensible comparison. 2, when we talk about duplication here, we're not saying there cannot be any duplication. Indeed, we recognize that there will be duplication, and in fact, in many areas, as you just pointed out, there must be duplication in order to achieve the types of quality that we want our institutions to achieve. So I think everybody here recognizes that. To the extent they don't, I'm sure when a university comes before us with a proposal for a PhD program, they will remind us that if they don't have a PhD in English, that there's a good chance that they'll have the following problems.
There's certain core that we recognize that.
I was just thinking, if we were using the California system as a comparison, this may be another way of getting at that comparison to see what is duplicated across those 8 institutions that are ranked so.
Well, and as to that narrow point, I would agree completely, and I'd ask the Chancellor to make sure that he, perhaps with Ms. Pappas, who is with us today, pull that together very quickly. That should be relatively easy to do.
Governor Edwards.
This has been, for me, a very interesting and rewarding last year with this report, the public hearings, and everything that went with it. It certainly was timely, and John, I think you really should accept the congratulations for moving this ahead. What I think we're seeing is the beginning of a slight change in the method by which our state university system operates. We know, as was pointed out yesterday, that we're going to need to increase the number of baccalaureate degrees by 35,000 a year to meet the goals set by the economic community. We know with the existing funding, if it continues at the rate it is now, that's going to be very difficult. There was a very interesting article in one of the publications that we receive on our news clips that said, as it relates to universities, the old American saying that you can be anything you want to be, unfortunately, is not true. And that is so very true. I don't blame a president for wanting their university to be the best they could be in every aspect and for going after it. Unfortunately, that's kind of what's happened over the last number of years, with 11 universities going 11 different ways. And the result has been where 25 years ago, 20 years ago, actually 15 years ago, we had a system that by two different sources was ranked 5th and 6th in the country. We're now not even in the top 25 any longer. So the bottom line is these type of things have got to change. As it relates specifically to the comment that every university can't be what they want to be if they work hard enough, if we had the sufficient funds, we could be. But we don't. We have to live with what we have. And I think that this is certainly a step in the right direction. Florida Gulf Coast University, John, for your information, was originally created as a teaching university to only offer programs up to the master's level in certain areas. That's changed, but only slightly. I don't know what motion would be in order here. I would suspect, John, you've already done a good job of laying out the parameters of it. If you would make it, I'm sure we could second it and move forward here.
Thank you. Let me make them separately.
Wait a minute, Governor Desberg. Governor Perez, did you ask to speak?
My only question...
Excuse me, Governor Desberg, he had asked.
I'm sorry. The only question I've got is, first, Governor Desberg, thanks for this work. I think it takes us in the right direction and gets us far down the road in our conversation, our thought process. I'd be curious to know, we're looking at this not for the first time, but certainly fairly recently with the appendices and the proposals and the presentations. And I'm wondering if our presidents and our boards of trustees have had an opportunity to look at them and adjust them as well to give us some feedback before we take too many steps down the road. On the macro analysis, it certainly sounds, feels, smells like the right direction to go in, but I'd certainly like some feedback from our partners in the universities and make certain that we're all on the same directional page, or at least we understand when we're not on the same directional page before we move too far down the road approving too many motions.
Well, Governor President, to your point, we did have public meetings. How many public meetings, Chancellor?
Nine.
Well,
and I attended several of those,
yes,
Madam Chair, and those were public meetings with regard to the Pappas report and the direction. But now we've got some specific presentations and proposals, and I'd just be curious if there's feedback out there that we should take into consideration before we make too many motions down the road. Again, directionally, I like it. Conceptually, I like it. I just want to make sure that procedurally we're getting all the input in before we move too many steps further.
Governor Desberg, as you were talking.
You're the chair.
No, I interrupted you, and I apologize, but we were having a little order here. So,
well, no, but I think you need to address the governor's request. Are you? Is the answer no, or is the answer yes?
I want the feeling of this board, because this is a conversation we've been having for a long time, and I don't know about the rest of you, but I've had a lot of conversations with
I haven't seen any president wanting to talk. Certainly they have the right to do so.
President Hitt, I believe, does.
I do. I have really appreciated the opportunity to have a dialogue with Governor Dasberg and others about this, and I would. My comments are along the same lines as Governor Perez's. I think directionally this is great, but I have to say that some of the materials we've gotten, the appendices, the procedures with regard to doctoral degrees, frankly, I'm seeing these, to the best of my knowledge, for the first time this week, when I haven't really even had a time to look at them in detail. I did note one of the appendices showed that in a particular year, the University of Central Florida had over $100 million in research expenditures, $0 from the federal government. The likelihood of that is zero. I really haven't had a chance to think about before today the procedural issue of whether this board looks at master's degrees. You have not done it. I'm not sure I see the pitfalls in that Governor Dasburg does. So if, to the extent that you would be committing yourselves and all of us to specific procedures with regard to approval of doctoral degrees or bringing the Board of Governors back into, as the Board of Regents were, in the approval of master's degrees, I just would not be ready to take a position on that. I don't know whether the Council of Academic Vice Presidents has had a chance to review these procedures in their meeting, and that's the way this board is normally undertaken regulation of academic matters. So I'm directionally, Governor Dasburg, I'm with you. I appreciate your willingness to hear me out on some of the issues that were in play. I think freezing the 10 as they are, raising important questions about the expansion of university mission and goal is dead on. And my sense is, generally I support the report, but when you get to the specifics on how we'll approve a doctoral, or you will approve a doctoral degree, and whether you ought to be back into that master's degree approval, I'm not ready to take a positive position on that today personally. That's just my 2 cents worth, but there it is.
In a discussion with President Hitt, I'd like to comment on that, if I may. Governor Dasburg mentioned this. It appears sitting on this side of the table, and we all want to work together for better. We all agree where we want to go. Mm-hmm. We don't have any disagreement with the trustees, with the presidents. But from this side of the table, it appears that when a master's degree has many students, and they're sitting in the room as they do, trying to encourage us to approve the next level, the PhD program, it's very difficult to say no, because you have students who have a story, who have whatever, family, work. And I think that's what we're addressing, that once you have a master's degree, that's a hard place to stop the conversation about duplication. It's just difficult to stop it at that level. Though Governor Chase made a good point that the very definition of universities has some duplication. And we have 2 governors that wanted to talk. And did you have your hand up, Governor Chase? Did you? Excuse me. Our student, our wonderful student, Governor Mosley.
Quick comment, and I think it's kind of related to a lot of things that have been said, is directionally I'm on the same page as well. One comment that I did want to make, though, was on the concept of getting to the national average in tuition. And I think the goal is right in the direction, in the sense of our goal is service, and that service obviously has a dollar value associated with it. But from a student's perspective, we're interested to improve that service, improve that quality. Our goal is not necessarily to make tuition X, Y, Z. It's what is that tuition that's going to bring that service. And I just want to.
Would you be more comfortable if we took out within 3 years and work with the students?
I'd be comfortable with maybe some language you said, something along the lines of, making tuition based off the services that we're trying to provide here. Some goal kind of toward that. I'm a little cautious of saying that tuition needs to be X, Y, Z when we haven't necessarily defined what the product is going to be exactly, and whether we can receive efficiencies and we can do it cheaper than the national market can to provide that same service.
That's a very good point.
Let me address that.
Yes,
I think that's a totally valid point. That what we really ought to be doing is talking about outcomes, and if it doesn't require the national average in tuition to achieve that outcome, you ought not to be charging the national average in tuition just to say as a goal we're charging the national average in tuition. So I think that that's a very valuable piece of input, and prospectively, Mark, I think my opinion is we ought to change that language and position it more as the governor has positioned it, that it's really the quality we're trying to achieve and the baccalaureates we're trying to achieve, and whether the tuition's at national average or not will really be a derivative of that.
Thank you. Governor Edwards and then Governor Pappas.
Going specifically to the question on the master degree approval, there's more to it than just duplication. If, for example, and I'm going to take part of Gulf Coast because I happen to be looking at Dick at the time, if as a system our goal for them is to increase basic baccalaureate production, and instead they elect to add 15 new master's programs, they can do that. And that's not what we're trying to do. I would point out, and John was under it, he might not have agreed with it then, but under the old Board of Regents system, where the master's programs were approved by the statewide board, we somehow managed to have the fifth best system in the country. And with it being done by the individual universities, we're not in the top 20. Now, I recognize that's not the reason we're there. I see no problem with this board assuming the approval of the master's program as long as we have reasonable guidelines set to do it. And we've done that before, and I think it could be done again very easily.
Governor, thank you, Governor. Does Governor Pappas?
I may be confused by what we're doing here, so if I'm out of order, you can tell me. But what is going to be the posture of this document that was presented by the Chancellor as we move through our actions today? Is this going to be a document that the staff begins to work off of to develop something more definitive?
Yes, this document has a series of actions in it. And what the staff would now do, for example, let's just take compacts. We would not be in a position to approve today the goals of each university with regard to baccalaureate production. What this document says is we need to get there, and so now the staff would sit down and unless somebody says something about the document or the thoughts behind it today, the staff would now work with the universities. They'd come back to the Board of Governors and say, we don't even have to wait till we have all 10. We have 3 universities we've reached a compact with. Here's where they are. Here's what they're going to produce. And the Board of Governors, okay. And it's like a budget process then. We approve the budget. We ought to approve their baccalaureate goals because that's at the heart of the strategy, is quality baccalaureates and funding. So that's what would actually happen. So there are steps in here, Governor, that lead to improved quality, more baccalaureates. And so today, for example, I'm prepared to make the following motion today. I would move today that this board agree to freeze the 10 universities and that henceforth until this board sees reasons otherwise.
Freshman enrollment.
No. You would freeze the 10 universities today as universities, and from this day forward, any universities that we add / colleges, whatever we want to label them, will be baccalaureate only. I'm prepared to offer that as an amendment, as a motion today, and to get it approved today. Because coming out of this document, to me, that's black and white, and all the meetings we've had lead me easily to that conclusion, and I would hope that there isn't much more debate on that. On the other hand, as Governor Perez pointed out, I'm prepared to make a motion that the Board of Governors ought to take over the approval of master's degrees, subject to criteria to be submitted to the Board of Governors and the presidents to be worked out, to be more specific. But I'm prepared to make a motion today because I believe that this board ought to approve master's degrees. That may fail, may not fail, may be all kinds of discussion. I'm prepared today, but I acknowledge John Hitt's comment, I'm prepared today to make a motion that the criteria for PhDs in this appendix should be adopted. But I recognize John Hitt's issue, and so therefore I won't make that motion. However, at the December meeting, I'm going to make that motion. And so if anyone has any views about this criteria they'd like to change, they need to get it in to the Chancellor, who'll discuss it with me, and if I have to, I'll make a full loop back to the President. But then we can have that discussion at the full Board of Governors in December. But in December, I'm going to make a motion that this appendix regarding the criteria for approving a PhD be approved. So, and I'm today prepared, if it is the sense of this board, to instruct the chancellor to come back to us and no later than the March meeting, or whatever the meeting is closer to March, with compacts with the universities with regard to their goals for producing more baccalaureate or improving their rate of baccalaureate production from where it is today.
So would you make your
Those
first
are what I would
motion?
do. So
Make your first motion.
my first motion is, I believe we should there's probably a better word than freeze here, by the way, but I'm prepared. Okay. My motion is this. Let's freeze the 10 universities, and prospectively, any new universities/colleges will be baccalaureates only. That's my motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Call the question.
Governor Chase. The question's been called. All in favor, all raise their hands, yes. Madam Secretary, you have the vote. Opposed? Any hands opposed? Do you have the count?
It's unanimous.
Second motion, sir.
Okay, second motion. I believe the Board of Governors should approve all master's degrees.
Carolyn?
Is there a second? Well, we'll have discussion. Is there a second? Second.
I'd like to
Mr.
make a
President.
suggestion that obviously that you could disregard. I think there's three sections here that are bolder statements than they seem on their face. The first is the approval, the final approval being shifted on master's degrees to the Board of Governors from the local boards. The second is the more formal declaration that the Board of Governors shall adopt a compact with the local universities relative to their mission. And obviously the intent there is to find a niche here that the Board of Governors will be comfortable with over time. And then the final is the idea that the Board of Governors would be involved in the elimination of PhDs programs. I would suggest that, and not to necessarily slow things down, that perhaps there should be some discussion back to the local boards of trustees on that, because that's a pretty big power shift isn't the right phrase, but that's a shift of authority that has existed now at the local boards for a number of years. And in saying all this, I think the concept of the entire document, including these provisions, I tend to think are probably a good way to go. But I paused when I read the first draft, I guess last week, when I got the draft last week on the masters, the missions. Obviously, this is a direction so that the Board of Governors has a little more control. But it may be healthy, Madam Chair, to get some dialogue with some of the board chairs, because I think it will seem rather abrupt to them with just having seen the document in the last week and not really understanding the full magnitude of it.
And I think you make a good point, President Delaney, but I think that we're clear that anything that comes from a university, we would recognize a recommendation, and I don't know automatically approve, but would honor a recommendation from the trustees. I think our board has established that relationship.
See, but if you're about to deal with the motion, I think before saying this is the policy, maybe a little more dialogue, something with the local boards would be a healthy thing. I know that I haven't given my boards a head up to the magnitude of this, although I tend to like it and tend to agree with it.
Your board has been very cooperative, and I certainly want to show respect to all the boards. You know that.
I just want to speak to one aspect of it. The approving of the compacts, et cetera, to define distinctive missions and so on. I mean, obviously those things have to be taken up, but the motion is simply, as I understand it, let's go about doing it, not saying what they are. But I would also like, if you would, when you get to making that motion.
He's made the one on the masters.
No, I know, but we're speaking. I'm now kind of responding to President Delaney, but also making a point that I would have made later. I would really like to see the universities look at their strategic plans and in conjunction with our overall system strategic plan, and I think that's some of the difficulty that we were having in the performance and the performance criteria that we were wrestling with yesterday. That you missed that unfortunate discussion, but I mean, I think they obviously need to engage with each administration as well as the boards. But I think our direction needs to be that those universities need to be in sync to some extent with the things that we find to be important in the long term in connection with the production of baccalaureate degrees, etc. The other and the critical needs and so on.
There's another part of that. We have to be responsive to the communities, because as we recognize, if this board approves this, there are times communities need certain programs or degrees, and economic development is a big responsibility. So, yes, Governor Duncan, we have a motion and a second on the table. To
and
remind.
I guess speaking to the motion, I agree in the concept of where we're going, and I think that it is the right step. I guess I'm concerned, just having looked at this, and when I was briefed and we went through this, and the proposed board action that we kind of set out there was broader, and it allowed for a little more time and response and dialogue, and to kind of, that was my initial reaction was, I think I don't think we will end up at any place different, and I think we can kind of say by adopting these core philosophies as the Chancellor proposed in his board action, and instructing him to come back with the detail in conjunction with those dialogues, that just my gut tells me I'm going to probably vote no to this motion, not because I don't support where it's going, but just because I think we need to take that next step of timing.
Yeah,
Governor Chasen and Governor Perez.
I agree. I think this motion is premature. I really think we need to go back to the boards of trustees. If we just vote today to take back masters without even notifying them that we're doing this, to take back the control of the masters, I think we've had enough of a rapprochement with them for the last 6 months, and we'll do great damage to that rapprochement.
Governor Perez.
I concur with Governor Chasen and Governor Duncan. I am more than prepared to support the proposed board action here. I like the direction, but I really want to get some dialogue back from the boards of trustees and make certain that they're aware of what we're doing. I think that's imperative.
Governor Marshall.
I just want to speak generally in favor of the last 2 or 3 comments. But with respect to the master's degree approval, I think just in general, the general policy of not cluttering up our policies or things that aren't necessary, I have not heard a persuasive argument in favor of doing that. I'm not really opposed to it, but why do it? Approval of the master's degree, that's all I'm talking about.
I'll have the Chancellor answer that after Governor
Actually,
Parker.
can we get the answer to that first, and then I can ask my
Chancellor.
Or even John.
Or Governor Dasburg, either. Who would you prefer
Chancellor
answer?
can answer this.
I believe that there is a conception that the evolution of degree development logically flows bachelor's, master's, doctoral, and that if we are to focus upon degree production and if we are to ensure that we're not duplicating, it might be easier to be thoughtful about that at the master's level than at the doctoral level, because doctoral level preparation and planning requires significant use of resources beyond simply master's degree development. It would be preemptive, and I think that's the approach that several board members are comfortable with. I must say for the record that I am not comfortable with that approach, because I do not believe that it follows logically that doctoral degrees follow from master's degrees. And I think I've indicated that on several occasions in other venues, but I understand why there is a sense about that. I believe that it might be premature for us to pass that motion, given that as well we have a process of policy that we ought to give notice for 30 days and allow for comment. So were we to really deeply get into that motion, I probably would be uncomfortable because we might not be following our own process that we ourselves have approved. So on substantive grounds, I'm a little concerned about it at this point, and I'd like for us to be able to look at whether indeed there is a logical relationship between a master's and a doctoral degree on one hand, and then I'd like to be able to get input from the universities on the other.
Okay, Chancellor, thank you. If I may, Governor Desberg, I'd like to put our consultant, Dr. Pappas, to answer it. She knows systems and can compare systems. Would you like to comment on this without putting you in an awkward position again?
It is.
I mean, I apologize, but I would value your opinion on this.
I think, frankly, that the issue of the logical sequence of events that most people appear to understand, bachelor's, master's, PhD, is not necessarily, as the Chancellor just said, Madam Chairman, the logical sequence of degree production or attainment. So I think that the point that's really being raised here is one of fundamental governance. And the issue of the masters is the sticking point in this discussion. So I think it would be very, very helpful to, in essence, take the approach that the Chancellor is suggesting, which is have that dialogue with the presidents and the chairs of each of the trustees, look at the policies that currently exist, frankly, and Steve Porches, in my opinion, some of the academic policies that have been written at the Board of Governors level need revision anyway. So this is a very natural way to do it, very thoughtful way to do it, within the context of the Strategic Planning Committee report that Mark Rosenberg has just given, if that makes sense. I just think you need that kind of thoughtful process. This is a huge decision that needs to be made. It needs to be made in the more broad context of mission focus of each of the 11 institutions, and so that's what I would, in essence, support the Chancellor's recommendation.
Call the question.
All right, call the question. The motion, I think we all understand the motion. All in favor, raise your hand. Opposed? Thank you. Is there a motion to proceed?
Wait a minute, here's another in favor.
Yes, in favor. 4. We're in favor.
Make sure you identify that.
I need to know because I just saw hands.
There were 4 in favor.
So I can say I told you so.
Do you want?
Yes. Hold the hands again for our corporate secretary. Did you not have your hand?
Favor. Parker. Wait a minute. I'm slow. Edwards, Parker, McDevitt, Dasbrook. Okay. Against?
Yes. Okay, Governor Duncan.
I would like to make a motion to adopt the policy outline that was in the package as far as our adopting the conceptual ideas, and that the detailed plans are brought back to us in December, with the clear understanding that, at least from my perspective, there's a strong support towards taking over the masters, but to allow that dialogue and to move in that direction.
Second.
The clarification, we have already approved one motion. We recognize that. And so you are recommending on page 4, 1, 2, and 3?
Correct.
Is that correct?
I'm not looking at
Yes.
this. Yes.
I think it's the language on the dicta set forth
Yes.
this.
And there is a second.
Right.
I have a comment. You have a second?
There's a second, and Governor Parker.
I guess the comment that I have is that I certainly, I guess, agree with that being the direction that we want to take, but it's almost so loose that I question whether we need a motion or not. It seems to me that if there's a need to have more meat put on the bone, then maybe we need to meet before we adopt any type of a position on it. So I don't have any problem with the motion. I just don't think it does anything. I mean, I think that what I liked about the way that we were going, even though it may not be the best time to do it, is that at least by the motions that's presented by Governor Dasberg, we were kind of making some concrete decisions and got an idea of what we liked and didn't like, or what we like and don't like. So I guess...
Let me add to that. The problem with this motion is it's 3 headings. It's just a motion to keep talking. We don't need a motion to keep talking.
Yeah, that's what I said, we wouldn't need one.
We always talk, we don't act. So this just says keep talking.
And if that's what we want to do,
We
it's
don't need a
okay.
motion for that.
But let's just say that's what we
Governor
want to do.
Pappas, excuse me, we have a motion and a second. Governor Pappas to the motion. I mean,
Well, sort of, but I do want to comment on the master's thing, because I think in the discussion, what I personally would like to see is, I can't believe that this master's discussion is an all-or-nothing proposition. There may be masters that it's entirely appropriate for us to have absolute autonomy over, and there may be masters that it just doesn't matter. So I think it would be instructive for us to hear that in more of a detailed, nuanced discussion. My second point is, this was my out-of-order question from before, so I'll ask it now. There's two things in here that don't really resonate for me well enough, and that is, when we talk about the compacts, that is, and I do think that's an appropriate direction, but there seems to me inevitably a discussion about our funding and our emphasis on funding, and the fact that as baccalaureate institutions, for example, are we as open and willing and engaged in providing the kind of funding and support to those institutions to be the best they can be, in the same way that we respond to things like sexy doctoral programs. And so I think we have to have a discussion about how we need to be funding those institutions, not just on the performance-based issues of retention and graduation, but recognizing that those missions in and of themselves are enormously important and deserving of as much attention as some of the more perhaps elaborate programs that we hear from. And then the second thing is, just from a publication standpoint, when we talk about appropriate and predictable funding, and this is a question, is it appropriate for us to also be talking about that as part of that activity we're going to be demonstrating system efficiencies and accountability? Because if appropriate funding assumes that we're doing our job of being efficient with the dollars. So I just think in terms of people who are reviewing this document, they might expect to see something.
absolutely.
That's a good comment, and we'll take that. I think that's in the context of when you make a request from the legislature, the feedback you always get is, as you know, well, you want an appropriate amount, and you want a predictable amount, but let's talk about how efficient you are and how effective you are. So the document has a few quasi-political statements in it that we can always expunge them.
Expunge. This board, we have to make difficult decisions, and we are lobbied. Every university has a vision that may or may not be part of what this board sees or can afford. And it is not a comfortable position to make the tough decisions, because I love everybody. We want everybody to be the best they can be. However, this board has to make tough decisions. And I talk to the editorial boards, and I talk to the business leaders, and I think I talk with most everybody. They expect this board to make tough decisions. And we can't just keep talking forever, because we've been talking a long time. So if we want to put a motion that puts a time frame on this discussion, then I think that's appropriate. But if we just want to keep talking, why would anybody come and just listen to us talking? I mean, we're just talking. Excuse me. Now, to that point, Governor Brass.
Madam Chair, a couple of thoughts, and then I am going to call a question on the motion. Thought number one is it certainly feels as though there's a sense of the board that everybody wants to move in the direction that we're moving, and I think there's a sense of the board also, at least based upon the last vote, that we want to do it with a little bit more input back from the universities. And whether or not we accept that input, that's great, but we'll certainly hear it. They'll know it's important to us, and we move forward from there.
Don't call a question quite yet when you finish that one more person. Excuse me. Go ahead.
Okay, well, after Governor Edwards, I will call a question then. So my suggestion is I would support this motion to continue talking to a time certain of December, and I would ask that as you set up the agenda for December, you set up a couple of hours of session for us to have these conversations. I think Governor Pappas raised some good points with regard to master's degrees and what is and what isn't. I'd like to hear back from the universities and their trustees. It gives them some time to do that. And I'd like to see if March is a reasonable time to come up with a compact for those universities. I think that compact is going to require some trustee conversations. So what I would like to do is, after Governor Edwards speaks, I call the question on Governor Duncan's motion, which is this proposed board action, with a definitive timeline of a meeting in December to have a conversation about the master's degrees.
Not a conversation, a vote.
Okay, and ask the chancellor to come back with some information.
Wait a minute. What amendment, what motion are we having in front of us?
The motion in front of us is the one from Governor Duncan, which is the one that was in the package. And what I'm saying is I will move to amend that motion before we call the question to, number one, set a definitive timeline for December to make a decision on the master's degrees after input, and then in December determine what the right amount of time is for the compact decisions. I'm not sure March is a reasonable amount of time for the universities to get back and figure out their compact analysis.
I believe by the first motion that we unanimously approved to freeze the universities as they sit today,
yes,
the compact will be quite easy. They just have to look around.
Well,
because that is not going to be as difficult a conversation as it was without that motion that was unanimously passed. So I don't think it's going to be that.
And if March is appropriate, Madam Chair, I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure that it is in feedback from the universities. My only comment there.
Governor Edwards.
I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying this, but that wouldn't be unusual.
He likes to be.
I'm a strict constitutionalist. We tried an experiment that I supported. I was not in favor of getting rid of the Board of Regents, but once that happened, I supported it, and I opposed the amendment that created this board. It hadn't worked, folks. I mean, each university thinks, boy, it's worked great, because each university has been able to do something. But our responsibility is to the people of the state of Florida, not to any one university. Now, hopefully, we can work in a situation that all of our universities are as happy as they can be, but they're not going to be happy. And the Constitution says the Board of Governors shall govern the state university system, and the Board of Trustees shall administer it. What that means to me is they shouldn't be picking presidents. They shouldn't be setting master's courses. They should administer the policies that this board sets for the entire state. And I believe that firmly and strongly, and I will believe it forever until somebody convinces me otherwise. Now, with that said, I know there are a lot of different opinions, but if as a system, if you look what's happened since we went away from a strong centralized control system to where we are today, it's been a disaster, and nobody can say it hadn't been. So this really doesn't relate to this motion, but I'm with the chairman when she says we've got to take some action soon, one way or the other, and I think we're headed in the right direction. I don't oppose the motion. All I'm saying is that there's a lot of things that are a part of this, and I want everybody to know up front where I'm coming from. There's no secret with my thoughts.
Did you have something you wanted to say?
Well, I mean, I would hate to vote for this motion and just throw out all of the things in here that we can do, like appoint a task force of the Board of Governors and the State Board of Education so that we can start working towards improving these graduation rates and those kinds of things. There's a number of things like that in there. I thought we were going to have this discussion today. That's what I thought this meeting was about. And that's why I would be inclined not to support the motion, because it's just putting off this kind of discussion. And, I mean, okay, so maybe there's some stuff we should defer, but not everything.
This is why we're paid such big bucks. President Manchin, are you?
I don't know. I need to speak to Governor Edwards, but if his comments are not germane to the motion, then I'll wait. But if his comments were germane to the motion...
No, they were not.
Then I'll
wait.
You're
welcome to...
I'll wait my turn.
I made that clear. They were not germane to the motion.
Well, then we can't let his comments go by.
Well, you're welcome to answer.
But I don't want to do it now. I'd rather get this motion.
Yeah, we need to deal with this motion, and then I will ask you to speak. But the motion is on 1, 2, and 3 on page 4, and I believe, Governor Perez, you were going to amend the motion, or am I?
My goal was to add a date of December to make a decision on the master's degrees and determine whether or not March was the appropriate date, but certainly to make a determination on the master's degrees in December with feedback from the universities so that we understand where we are there.
And the trustees, chairs, feedback from the collective
I'm
university.
sorry, if I made the motion, though, I also think we're dealing with the PhD process. I mean, I think December is the decision time for the recommendations. You know, it's not just the master's ones, it's everything that's in this recommendation.
So you have amended the motion to what specifically?
To really what I thought was the original proposed board action, which was move that we adopt the strategic initiatives as a core of its master plan, improve quality, increase baccalaureate degree production, provide appropriate and predictable funding, and direct the chancellor to bring to the board at the December meeting a detailed implementation plan for each of these initiatives, including specific action steps, timelines, responsible parties, metrics, accountability, costs, or savings estimates, in conjunction with dialogue for action at that meeting, is my motion.
And so is that amended by what Governor Perez has said? That's what kind of...
That includes that.
I am. Does anybody besides me, I understand your motion. You amended your motion, and did the second accept that amendment before we go on to discussion? You were the second.
Lynn has a question.
Yeah, but we need to get...
a question about this motion.
Okay.
He needs a second.
Governor Pappas.
But allow him to go ahead and make that second to the amendment.
Okay.
I will amend it, but I think we can instruct the universities to start on the compacts at this point in time.
So you do not accept her amendment if you're changing it.
Yeah.
That's the point. There's many
That's
of these
my
things
question.
Help me, Mikey. So we do not have
then
a
I
second
want
to
it
the
to-
amended motion. So we have a motion on the table.
The amended motion fails.
The amended motion fails. We have still a motion on the table.
Yes.
Can I?
Try again.
But I'm not sure about Mr. Perez's
Yeah,
addition.
let me, here's where I think we are, Madam Chair. I think you've got a motion for action which says we want to direct the chancellor to do X, Y, and Z for decision at the December meeting. What Dr. Chase is talking about, and frankly what Governor McDivitt is talking about, we can certainly ask the universities without a motion to begin working on the compact that they know is coming. We can ask you, Madam Chair, to appoint a task force without a motion on our part. So a lot of the things that are in these appendices that can be done between now and then certainly can and should be done to begin the process. I don't know that my amendment was necessary to Governor Duncan's motion. It's very clear that the motion calls for a proposal by the chancellor for action in December, and I think that's what we need. And I think in the interim, we need to have communication with the universities and the boards of trustees. So I would stand with the motion of Governor Duncan that is what's on page 4, calling for action on these items in December, and in the interim, ask you and the chancellor to communicate to the universities our intention and have them start the processes that make sense out of the appendices that we've talked about, including working on their compacts and creating whatever joint task force you can create.
So you are
But
not
that-
amending
yeah,
the
but that-
motion.
yeah, that-
You are, what?
I guess my only response to that, Governor Perez, is that it seems to me that we can't have the universities or the chancellor starting to do anything until we vote in December, because it seems like what you're suggesting is that, or we're assuming that the different pieces in here that we're all going to agree upon, and so we want to go ahead and get them started on those pieces, so we haven't voted to accept those pieces yet, and actually won't be voting for anything in total as far as an action plan until December based upon a motion as it's presented. An option would be to go ahead and let's take some action on some of those things we can agree upon today and vote them in. I mean that's the option that kind of gets to where you want to go, and maybe those things that people are not comfortable with, then we pass those on for more conversation until December. So just a thought. I'm sorry.
For this, then I'll withdraw my motion if you're going to make a motion on something that you're proposing a specific action on, if you'd like.
Pacheco, restate it.
No, I think she's talking to Governor Parker.
Okay, Governor Parker.
If there are specifics, but I think Governor Pappas has got...
Governor Pappas before the motion.
Well, you may be answering my question, but you've got a motion and you've got 3 items identified which relate back to a document that's been submitted. So when I read that to say improve quality, increase baccalaureate degree, and provide appropriate and predictable funding, that takes me back to the recommendations that are appearing on these pages. If we're moving those items 1, 2, and 3, I'm interpreting that to say we're moving that in all of the body of the document.
That is correct.
And if that's not then I'm confused, because we've now separated out a motion on 1A, we've declined a motion on 1D. So it seems to me that if those are the two items that people are uncomfortable with, then we can pass it and move D out of the picture and then pass the rest of the document as a complete document to begin work. But I'm at a loss in assuming that moving 1, 2, and 3 means nothing but the 3 little lines here on this piece of paper. That just doesn't make any sense to me.
Governor Duncan, was that your intent, that by passing those 3 that we were passing the items in the document in the pages beforehand?
What I guess my intent is that we were conceptually moving in that direction, pending the additional input, that we would kind of do the revisit, but kind of put everybody on notice. This is the direction we're going. Speak now, forever hold your peace. We're voting on it affirmatively in December, but there would be that it would not be a line in the sand not to ever be crossed or revisited. That point in that discussion would happen in December, but we were moving in that direction was my intent.
But it wasn't the whole document. It was 1, 2, and 3 on page 4.
The 1, 2, and 3.
That's what I think we are.
So not
Madam Chair, maybe I can be helpful here.
Please.
We've passed a motion. We've had a motion, a strategic motion today to freeze the universities and prospectively only add baccalaureates. That's a lot for this board. Now, that's a big deal. That's an enormous strategic decision. We've been at that for a year and a half. Okay. It is clear from this conversation that no other motions will pass tonight, because everything has to require more study and conversation. And that historically is for various reasons, whether it's not. I'm not saying this in a condescending way. Historically, we've tried to build relationships to the universities and to the administrations of the universities and with each other. And it's clear that whether it's a master's degree or the criteria for the PhD or anything else in here, what we really need is time to digest the document. We don't need a motion to digest the document. We don't need a motion to come back in December and go through the document and just go down the document. And it says, I'll make a motion, the Board of Governors ought to approve master's degrees. We'll have a discussion of that. If we're not ready for a discussion in December, we can have that discussion later. Nothing is going to happen between now and December or next March with regard to master's degrees that is going to matter. So it seems to me we ought to we've got a motion, we've already done something today. Let's come back in December and just go down the list, which is what I had begun to do, only I'd chosen masters first because I knew it would be the most controversial. And so we'll come back and go down the list, and as we go down, we'll approve or we'll argue or we'll do whatever we're going to do. And inevitably in December, there will be some things approved. And inevitably in December, there will be things that require study. And inevitably in December, there'll be committees formed to do other things. And I don't think we need any motions, and we're spending all this time discussing procedure when let's just come back in December and go down the document and knock them off one at a time.
Governor Duncan?
That's fine by me.
Governor Press?
I second it.
It's not a motion.
I still second it.
So for clarification, this document, we will review it and vote by item or as a whole.
Not as a whole.
By line.
We might vote it.
But as the board's pleasure in December, we will vote one way or the other on this document. Governor Parker?
I guess the one advantage of that process is that at least everybody's on notice. And everybody seems to be very concerned about that issue. So everyone's on notice about the direction of at least the chairman of this committee. So therefore, you can digest it. And we certainly want to encourage staff to have a lot of conversation with the university so that when we talk about it again, we can make some final decision.
I don't think discussion with the universities is going to be a problem. Because my friends on the trustees and my president friends, I believe we're going to have a lot of discussion, which is, and I welcome that. And if you don't call me, I'll call you, because we all need to have a discussion. This is very important, but as I said, this board, we have got to make some decisions, or we're just going to just talk right out of our to death. Governor Perez, one more thing, did you say?
One more thing, and
I don't believe you.
I would only ask that you schedule a strategic planning committee of the whole with appropriate time for us to have these conversations before the next meeting, maybe on the day before the meeting, so we can actually have an in-depth conversation about this.
But I think we will discuss that, but I believe we can have it not as, it'll be up to Governor Dasberg, whether he wants to chair it as a strategic planning committee of the whole or part of the general board meeting, and I'll have the chance to discuss that with you.
I'll just give you my views right now. I think we ought to do it the way we're doing it here. We ought to call the Board of Governors meeting, and everybody's here, and the presidents are here, and we ought to just do it one time only. Otherwise, we're going to have a strategy committee. We're going to do a strategy committee. Then we have to come to the board, and we have to have a committee report that takes you through 35 items, and whoever voted against something will want to make sure their voice is heard. And that'll be true, because there's going to be a lot of stuff that won't be unanimous. And so then I'll have to report we had 7 for and 5 against. So my opinion is to take some of the process out of it, to just do it, to conduct this meeting as a board meeting.
Then I would just ask that you schedule plenty of time.
We will schedule plenty of time, and I will ask staff in scheduling it, and I ask that everybody be in attendance. We know the date. I believe it was December 6th. And we'll just come early and stay late. Is that right, Chancellor? Now,
by the way, you might be able to take some of the other committees and not meet then, so you can clear the calendar a little bit.
That's what I was thinking about.
I believe that this will be the meeting, and we want input. President Manchin, you wanted to comment.
Yeah, the process you're going through, it doesn't make any difference, but what's the elephant in the room here is the governance structure of higher ed in this state. And I think the actions you're talking about taking, at least we give Governor Edwards credit for being clear about why he's doing what he's doing. He doesn't like this governance model, and he wants to go back to the Board of Regents. But I think leaving the trustees out, the way this document does, basically says that this board is not given that model that was set up a full discussion. If that's where we're going, we don't need to go through. You can make all these actions and the Board of Trustees will get it. They're out. But I think you owe it to the system to have a conversation, because I think Governor Edwards' opinions are just that, his opinions. And I think there are lots of other ideas about what's good about the model, what could be better if the Board of Governors did certain things and didn't do certain things. So if the elephant in the room is the governance system of higher ed, I wouldn't worry about master's degrees. That's just a small little speck on the paper. The whole issue is, what's the role of trustees in the system that we've got? So I'm just worried that you all are going to take a series of actions that are going to end up telling indirectly the Board of Trustees what you think of them and what you want them to do, when we could have a much more intelligent dialogue about how to articulate the role of the Board of Governors and the roles of the Boards of Trustees, and find out. If everybody thinks it's a failure, maybe that takes care of it. But there are other opinions about that exist that have not been heard.
Thank you, President Manchin. I believe this board's been, or I think that I've been very open with the Boards of Trustees, and they are doing, and I hope will continue to do, the work of managing great universities. I think the issue is, I can't speak for Governor Edwards, but the issue is for me that we have a goal that we all agree on for greatness of our university system, but different opinions of the definition of the mission of universities, simply put. And if somebody has to make a decision, because we've been talking about it a long time, and the public expects us to make a decision. The legislature expects us to make a decision. So it's very difficult for me, because when I talk to each of you presidents that I respect, I buy into what you're saying. It sounds wonderful to me. So, but somebody has to make difficult decisions, And it's not always the most comfortable place to be. But I do respect the trustees and know that I believe our governance system is working. But maybe there has to be some change in the details. Governor Parker, then Governor Edwards. Did you want to speak? Governor Parker?
I guess my reply to Dr. Matchin is that I think that my support of this concept is really not a statement about whether or not the governance system is working or not. So I don't want trustees to believe that my support of developing a strategic plan for the state university system means that I'm suggesting that trustees should have fewer responsibilities and we should take over the universities. But I do think that in developing a strategic plan, that as a member of the Board of Governors have a responsibility to make some decisions about how we can maximize our resources. And in some instances, that may mean that some responsibilities that were previously placed on the shoulders of trustees, it may be in our better interest in order to ensure that we're economizing and maximizing our resources, that we bring them back. But I would not want any trustee to believe that, and I can only speak for myself, that by supporting this model or this concept, that I'm in turn thinking, you're useless and we want to take away your responsibility. So I just wanted to put that on the record. Sorry, John.
Yeah, and I'm not going to debate President Matchin today. I certainly recognize his position. I did not call for the abolishment of the Board of Trustees. What I have said and what I feel is that there is a constitutional role for the Board of Governors, and that is very clear. Couldn't be clearer. And these courts will make these decisions in the next couple of months, and we'll see how it comes out. What I would like to do, Madam Chairman, off of this subject, and I don't think this takes a motion unless somebody objects, but I would like staff to do two things. One, several of our presidential searches and a couple of the foundation board meetings that I've attended have clearly shown to me that there's some confusion about where our system stands on government in the sunshine. Clearly, we are under government in the sunshine. Yet, in several occasions, there seems to be an attempt made to do everything we could do, not this board, but university boards, to get away from that. So I would like the staff to prepare a motion, a document, so that it would be an official position of the Board of Governors that the Board of Governors, the universities, the direct support organizations, all are under government in the sunshine, and that the only exemptions be the statutory exemptions. Now, I'm not calling for debate today. I'm just asking, I'm announcing it ahead of time, but I'm asking staff to prepare it so we have a document. The second thing that I would like to do, and I'm not proposing anything, I am simply asking if staff could look at systems similar to ours, and maybe others, to determine how they select presidents. And I'm just trying to get information. And I don't know if it requires a motion, but I don't think it does. But I wondered if anybody objects to staff doing that. I wanted to.
Any comments? I think that's direction, and I would ask staff to do that.
I would be curious if all DSOs are in the sunshine. I was not aware that foundations and athletic association boards, and I don't know that all DSOs are in the sunshine. So I'd be curious at what the staff's results are.
I'm making it clear. If they're not operating in the sunshine, if they're a part of our system, they should be.
Okay, that was a distinction.
Can you comment on that? Because I know our foundation works in the sunshine. You look interested.
I'm not asking we do anything. I'm just asking we prepare.
Asking a dentist a legal.
I have no idea what. I've been sued twice about my sunshine emails. I do believe legally. Not all of the entities are required to be in the sunshine, legally. That doesn't mean that a ruling by this board couldn't make them all practice in the sunshine, as we do with our foundation. Legally, it does not have to be in the sunshine, but as a matter of practice, we have it perform in the sunshine.
Well, actually, I've got an opinion that says it has to be in the sun. Foundations have to be in the sunshine, with the exception of donors.
There's a statute about that, so this is not something we need to argue about.
Yeah.
No, we.
There's an Attorney General's opinion that came out last year or year before last. I'd say all the guys are nodding. that indicated that the DSOs do need to be, but prior to that, they didn't. And it has caused some interesting issues about cross memberships and things like that, and some of the exemptions for research secrets and that sort of thing. So that element ought to be carefully looked at by the lawyers. But there is an Attorney General's opinion that says they're due. It's only 2 years old.
This board does not want to disrupt universities as they do business. We just want to be law-abiding, and I think all the presidents agree. So, is any disagreement on that? No. So, no. But we have no motion. The agreement is we will come back on December the 6th, Chancellor, is it whatever December, and we will take this up at a full board meeting for as long as it takes. And during that time, I hope all of you will call the presidents, the trustees, if they don't call us first. And yes, ma'am.
All right, I'd like to ask the chair if you would engage in a conversation with the chair of the State Board of Education.
Absolutely.
And see if y'all could agree to appoint a combined group with the appropriate staff so that we can get about looking at how we can improve these graduation rates and the pipeline to college.
I will ask our liaison that was sitting here to help me with that, because I think, Commissioner, don't you think they will invite conversation?
Absolutely, and also, again, a lot of this dialogue has already been going on with the Go Higher Task Force.
Right.
So I don't know, you haven't had a presentation on that, but absolutely the State Board.
And I have talked to your chairman, and I talked to your members, and so we do have a dialogue, but formally I think it would be appropriate since we're all the best interest of the state.
Could I?
Yes, Commissioner.
One thing in terms of there's a lot of discussion in terms of whether you should approve, the board should approve masters or PhDs and so on. But I would like some discussion as we move forward to performance-based funding, because that may. I think that's very important to look at in terms funding drives behavior. And you certainly can look at it in terms of your most productive programs and come back with some discussion on how you could use a performance-based funding.
That is very important to this conversation, and that's tied to the accountability measures. And we have told the legislature time and time again that we certainly intend to be accountable. Thank you, and that will be part of the discussion. I think I'm through the agenda, but Chancellor, Governor Marshall.
Madam Chair, it's a matter that doesn't relate directly to governance, but it does to degree production. In his opening comments, the Chancellor made reference to collaboration with the independent institutions. That was not one of his 5 points, however, and we haven't discussed it since, but it seems to me that collaboration with the independent institutions offers great promise in terms of production of particularly all degrees.
Well, yeah, that would have been my next request, is to please ask staff to engage immediately with ICUF and try to develop your creative model or whatever these words are. Come back with something concrete. But I think, and I was going to ask this while you were speaking, I heard a statistic earlier today, and I don't know if it was an annual one or not, but do you know what the annual percentage of baccalaureate degree production is coming out of FRAG institutions?
Yes, we produce it in higher education, 60,000 baccalaureate degrees a year, approximately, of which about 15,000 are produced by the ICUF institutions. So it's roughly about a third, a quarter. It varies, but in that direction.
About 25% is what I was told, but that's fairly significant. And I think, if you went and looked at the population of all of them together, they're doing a pretty good job.
Yes, and I would welcome the conversation. I would like to indicate to this board that the conversation that I'd like to have would be not only around the contribution that will be made, but also some performance standards in the same way that we are looking at performance standards that are more rigorously applied for our public institutions. And that's why I've said that I think that baccalaureate degree should be performance-oriented.
I temporarily lost my agenda and all this. Yes, completely. And we are going to postpone the presentation, number 6. We're going to postpone that. I think we've done about all we need to do today.
Would you like us to just do those in writing to you, keep it 1 or 2 pages,
very nice.
and then save you some time?
Could you make them
short? Say a maximum of a page and a half, something like that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, a page, 1 page.
1 page. Okay.
Double space.
Even better.
No, we want all the information you give. And yes, sir.
Madam Chair, I was a Board of Trustee at the university longer than I've been a member of the Board of Governors. And I think the comments concerning what do the Board of Trustees do and what do the Board of Governors do, that's an important comment. And I think we really have to look into that because there'll be a lot of boards of trustees who will be very, very upset about some of the things that I've heard here today. I just wanted to make that comment.
And just by the way, we don't have the staff to do what the universities and the Board of Trustees are doing. They are doing a very good job in most every area, and I want to go on record as saying that. Governor Chase. Governor Press, I know you have one more.
I just want to move to adjourn, Madam Chair.
Oh, is there a second? Second. All in favor of meeting adjourned? Thank you very much.